In 2018's Aggretsuko, frustrated by her thankless office job, the 25-year-old red panda copes with her daily struggles by belting out heavy metal karaoke after work. Unfortunately, given that this is a animated series, it's not really going to have a main writer or a main director, but it is what it is. Welcome to the American Recut. I'm Nick.
I'm Brendan.
And let's go ahead and, first of all, obligatory COVID statement. Delays, haven't been able to get together for recording. You know the drill.
And let's face it, there's not a whole lot of good movies out right now anywho, so,
So we've been taking a bit of a back seat for recording. In this case, picking out here and there what catches our eye or what interests us. And today that is Aggretsuko's third season, meaning that we won't really be talking much about seasons 1 or 2, maybe just a very brief statement on if we liked it or not, and then focusing on season 3.
We're more focused on season 3 because it's more recent and it just caught our eye. So let's get right into it.
So let's go ahead and do a quick recap of season 1, season 2, our own way. Each of us giving our own brief summary of what it is and our thumbs up, thumbs down. In fairness, there may be some light spoilers, so you have been warned.
Alright, so season 1. The synopsis pretty much covered it, in the sense that it is about a slice-of-life comedy through the perspective of an adorable little red panda.
I would make the argument as well that in addition to it being slice-of-life comedy, it also does a lot of philosophizing about the nature of work and satisfaction, and what it means to be happy with your job, which is a big part of why it caught a lot of people's eye, mine included, the first time through.
Oh yeah, definitely. The relatability of, the complex rat race and office life, definitely.
But I would say for season 1, this was highly recommended for me, on the level of classics like Futurama or BoJack Horseman. Excellent show for me in the first season.
Very good first impression, definitely. It also, very lovely cast of characters, and pretty good and pretty decent writing.
Oh yeah, the writing has been a consistent standout of the series. Season 2 got a bit more over the top with its plot lines. The focus began to shift away from necessarily the workspace and rather wish fulfillment and generally questions about satisfaction in the modern world. Like a bit bigger of a scope than before. It expanded the idea of the first season, went to some interesting places with that. And I would say overall, I liked season 2 well enough. I didn't like it as much as season 1, but I liked it.
Now I'm gonna, be the odd one out and say I liked season 2 a little more than season 1, mainly because there was so much expanded upon, I think, more characters introduced, and definitely more, more insights on the complexity of relationships and, like you said, Nick, wish fulfillment, which was an interesting theme to touch up on.
But with that brings us to Season 3, which is what the bulk of this is going to be about. I and Brennan will attempt to be as spoiler light as possible while discussing this, but there will be a point where spoilers are necessary, including very light spoilers, even in just talking about the season, so spoilers from here out, but not heavy ones yet. I'll try and make a statement when we have heavy spoilers.
You have been warned, though, first and foremost.
Alright, so Season 3... It takes a unique angle, which is side gigs in this case. The idea of growing your own side business and seeing what becomes of it. It takes us to much more extreme levels than previous seasons did with their own concepts. And I would say, despite the fact that it is very different from where it started, I'm still in favor of it. But we will go into each of our respective categories. Let's go ahead and begin with the plot.
Plot-wise, it's like you said. The plot definitely took a bigger turn here than I feel like it did in some of the other previous seasons. Like you said, it talks about side gigs, but I mean, the nature of the side gigs is pretty radical, pretty out there.
Yes, I would definitely say that compared with the previous 2 seasons, this season shifts much more towards being very Retsuko and Haida heavy, rather than the other characters as it has been in previous seasons. I would also say that it's very different from the show that you kind of come to see for seasons 1 and 2. Does that necessarily make it bad? No, I don't think so. I think it's actually fairly good for what it's trying to do.
I'll agree with that. It's not bad. It's not as excellent as the last 2 seasons, but it's still pretty entertaining. It's an interesting take.
All right, next up, let's talk about themes. As always, the show excels at exploring different themes, whether it be philosophies of side jobs, the nature of self-motivation, the idea of the dollar you earn versus the dollar you're paid, and the idea of extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation as well. There's a lot of heavy themes that are explored in this season as well, possibly the best of all 3 seasons in regards to its laser focus on themes and personal developments. Alright, let's move on to the effects. I would say for the effects, I would focus specifically on sound design for this season, because it is at its absolute strongest in this season of all 3 seasons.
Oh, yeah. I definitely adore the sound in this as well. I mean, very lovely music.
It has an excellent soundtrack with this season, without getting into exactly what's going on with it. It definitely plays more into the Aggretsuko as a metalhead than Aggretsuko as an office worker theme.
And that's fun to play with. I'm glad they decided to play with that more than they did in previous seasons.
It's an interesting season. I would say that it has a lot more glitz than previous seasons. But let's move on to characters, finally.
What do you mean by glitz before we do that? What do you mean by glitz?
It really throws us money at the effects and the animated scenes for this part. You can tell that there is a big budget increase here, especially when it comes to sound design. The sound design takes a huge step up in this season.
I'll agree with you on that one, definitely. Yeah.
But in terms of characters, that is the place where the season can fail or succeed depending on the characters you're attached to. Because, like I mentioned before, the season focuses heavily on Retsuko and Haida, at the cost of almost every other familiar character.
That's a good way of putting it, yeah. Every other character seems to be taking a back seat.
However, the characters that are introduced this season, much like the previous season, do all work, and they work well, especially as being flawed characters primarily.
Oh yeah, I have no bad words for any of the new characters introduced this season. They're as thoroughly entertaining to watch.
Though there is the minor drama of Haida'S Plotline, but we'll get into that with spoilers.
Oh yeah.
So, overall, would you say that you liked this season, or that it was a bit of a step down?
I would say... I wouldn't say that it was a step down. I just wouldn't say it wasn't as good as the previous 2 seasons, in the sense that, I feel like the plot kind of deviates a bit from what it was supposed to be, and just kind of goes a little more exaggerated and just a little more on the absurd.
Yeah, I would say that, for myself at least, this is a season that is very different from the previous 2 seasons. I have trouble saying if this is better or not, because in some places it does what other seasons did even better than those seasons, but in other places it struggles, and at the end of the day, I think my take on this would be that this isn't the show that I kind of fell in love with over seasons 1 or 2, but it is still good in its own rights. I think that, unlike a lot of shows where you have this drop off in the later seasons, it feels like maybe it can't go back or it's losing its sight. But with this one, it feels like this may have been just a one-off season to lay some groundwork for the future. I think that there's absolutely still high potential for this series, but I don't think that it's necessary to panic about it, no matter how you feel about certain developments that we'll get into in a moment.
Agreed, yeah, exactly. There's no reason to panic, or, it's still very good and fun to watch, but, in contrast to its 2 other seasons, it's just, it's good, but, it's just not, it didn't, wow me like the first 2 seasons did.
Alright, well, let's go ahead and get into heavy spoiler season territory. We will probably just go from topic to topic, talking about what interests us about this season. That's just the nature of TV in general and reviewing TV. So we'll probably just talk about things that interest us since we've covered the bases and the basics of this season. So, first thing I want to talk about, Haida'S Plotline. This is the crucial plotline of the entire series, or the entire season.
So, I want to ask you this. So, in regards to Haida'S Plotline, what are your impressions of it? How do you think that was a good thing to have done for this season, or what are your impressions of Haida'S whole plot line there?
I would say, though in the sense of if you're investing in this like as a universe, then Haida is an idiot that is chasing after a girl that will never love him as much. But in terms of like plot structure and what's necessary for the characters, Haida made the right choice. Because though Inui, who is Haida's kind of pseudo love interest and is set up as being an alternative for Haida, who's actually a responsible adult, though she is kind of a better person in general, she's not what Haida needs. Nor does Retsuko need somebody that would be responsible either, because the primary attribute of both of them is that they're idiots.
No argument there.
But they're both very emotionally driven idiots. Retsuko in particular tends to make very snap decisions based on how she's feeling, and at times she's proven that she can be remarkably intelligent, including during the final back and forth song that Retsuko and Haida have, which is excellent by the way. Retsuko makes the point that what she wants is somebody that isn't going to impose their values upon her, and Haida ultimately responds to this by saying that he's going to be by her side to lash out against the world like she does, and like he does. This is part of why I think they're a good pairing, is because they're both very emotionally driven characters who constantly lash out the first sign of trouble, and they need somebody that's going to be by their side to support them in being that idiot.
That was well summarized. No, an idiot couple, that's, I don't know. I'm kind of firmly against this couple dynamic, mostly because, the notion that, the one male friend has to hook up with the female protagonist, I don't know, it's just a trend that's so overdone and just tired, can't they just continue to be friends? I don't know. That's just my personal bias. Although, despite my protests, the development of this couple was very well done, because Haida was given that choice, and, like you said, he chose appropriately.
I would normally be on your side for this one, this being kind of very overdone, having the one male friend eventually hook up with the one female character, if it wasn't for the fact that this season goes out of its way to make a point to constantly identify that it's doing this. Because it constantly hammers home that Haida's being an idiot, that Haida is absolutely simping after her, that Haida absolutely cannot help but be infatuated with a girl who barely notices he exists. The show constantly points this out, notices this, and it still says to go in this direction, which, to me at least, tells me that they're not doing this out of obligation, but because there's a deeper reason that Haida is doing this for her than just because, well, they're both attractive and opposite genders. They must be in love.
No, right. They definitely elaborate more on why he's so infatuated with her, and it is kind of cute, it definitely provides us a little more depth to Haida as rather than just being a love-struck idiot. They go into why he really cares about Retsuko quite a bit.
They have that one scene, which I thought was really weird, when he's like drunk and like talking about like, I relate to her because she's a person. And like my thought during that there was like, that's why the audience relates to her. That's not why Haida relates to her, because Haida is also a person. This makes no sense for him to fall in love with her because she's stealing water.
Right. Throughout the first two seasons, it's just, Haida is just like crushing on her for no apparent reason. But, and they kind of do it in the first half of the season, but they do kind of, as the season progresses, they do kind of give us a little more clarity as to why he cares about her, which, cute, but...
Not much, though. He kind of just has a thing for her, which, in this case, because it's a stupid emotional connection that he has, it's actually kind of what Retsuko needs, because Retsuko talks about how she doesn't want somebody who's going to impose their values on her, or force her to conform to be something else, something that she's not. That's kind of her big thing, is like, she's kind of on the edge of nihilism in her emotional state, which, by the way, that is one thing I like about Retsuko quite a bit, is that Retsuko can at times have like all the words to match an ethos or philosophy, but she's making it from a place of emotion rather than reason. So a lot of times, while she may have the right reasoning, she usually doesn't quite buy into what she's saying herself, especially when she has these moments of real introspection that she shows.
No, right, all these quandaries she has about her love life, her profession, or herself in general, right?
But I would say that they primarily work as a couple because they're both flawed in ways that kind of help each other out. Whereas with a character like Inui, for example, I think that she's a bit too responsible to ever be satisfied with a relationship with Haida. She would absolutely be going beneath herself to date him.
And, after seeing all that resolved and taking some time away from the series, to just kind of like process that, I kind of came into that realization myself as well. Like, yeah, she was too good for him. She was too responsible and he was too reckless. It never would have worked out anyway.
Let's go ahead and talk about side characters for a bit as well, because this is kind of a critical make or break for the series. Is a lot of side characters from The Office, Director Tone, Washimi, Gori, Feniko, the dear co-worker. I always like her, but I never remember her name. A lot of these characters kind of fall off the map. They don't really get anything to do this season because it's so heavily focused on Haida and Aggretsuko.
No, right? They're basically, characters that had so many lines in the previous seasons are lucky to just get like more than one.
Which this is definitely the point where it can be really make or break for liking this season, because if you're heavily invested in these characters and attached to them, it can feel like the season betrayed that a bit by kind of shoving them off to the side. Let Retsuko and Haida have their love story.
Exactly. No, I was a little upset that Tone, her supervisor, didn't get more screen time. Some characters that we saw from the first season have definitely fallen off the map entirely, like the cat or snake woman. I mean, they were there in the background, but still.
Yeah, they got small reminders that the writers know they're there, but they just didn't have time for them this season. Which, do you think there's anywhere further the Office plotline and themes can go?
I hope so, because that's where it all started. It's kind of the cornerstone of the whole series, so I don't know. I would like to see a continuation of the Office life, but, what else can they do with it? I guess that's the next question.
That's the big thing. Was this season necessary because they didn't have anything else to do with that wouldn't be retreading their steps?
Well, I'm kind of optimistically going off what you said earlier. Like, this season is laying the groundwork for something else entirely. I'm not sure what that something else is, but, cautiously optimistic that it does go back to its roots, but
No, I feel like the writing was smart enough in this season, and smart enough what they were doing with different characters and pointing out the places where like tropes were happening, that they still know what they're doing. But I think that with The Office Life, they may shift the focus away from Retsuko herself, since it feels like she's got less and less she needs to do without having to invest herself in wildly different plot lines. I think that if next season starts to invest more in the other side characters, what they're doing, what their plot lines are, or possibly having Retsuko help them with their stuff, that might be a good direction.
Ooh, that is a good idea. I like where you're heading with that, because there are, like we said before, a gaggle of interesting characters, to see things from their perspective for a few episodes, that'd be nice. I'd like to see that. That's a good idea.
Yep, but speaking of characters, the new characters, how did you feel about characters like Hayodo, Monica, or Inui?
I liked them, actually. Inui was a very good character to have for Haida in, affirming his feelings. Hyodo and Monica, they were very humorous characters that kind of allowed Retsuko to kind of like flourish in her own, what would you even call it? Her own wish fulfillment of being a metalhead celebrity.
I really liked Monica in this case. Despite the fact that she was kind of very rude as a character and tended to kind of have this very aggressive outlook on life and very aggressive outlook on just performance in the cutthroat world of that, I really liked the way that she was handled as a character who takes her job very seriously, takes improvement very seriously, and has no time for people who aren't sure of themselves or don't have the self-confidence to really boost themselves into the spotlight.
Oh yeah, no, she really grew on me. I mean, she was a little salty at first, but she definitely grew on me, and I liked her quite a bit. I admire her passion and determination. It's something to be incredibly respected.
It's also the fact that she's one of very few characters who's willing to acknowledge out loud that, yeah, I've got a fucking problem with you stealing the lead singer role, but I acknowledge that we're going to do better as a band if we have you here, so I'm going to vocalize it, but I'm going to be an adult and deal with it myself by talking it out. It's nice to have a character that's willing to actually have the hard conversation and prevent this being an issue.
Right. Usually it's Tone that has these kind of conversations with Retsuko, but it was also kind of refreshing to see someone else take that kind of role or initiative.
It's nice to have another no-nonsense character who's no-nonsense in a different way. Because what Director Ton is no-nonsense in the sense that he knows how to get things done. Monica is no-nonsense in the sense that she knows how to improve on herself and how to really chase constant self-improvement.
Exactly, yeah.
But, so let's go ahead and get into the underground J-pop band angle that this season kind of has as the primary arc. It is the big focus of this season and really digs into the part of the show that kind of got left behind a bit in seasons 1 and 2, which is Retsuko's metal obsession.
It definitely focuses on Retsuko's metal obsession, but I feel like it just also takes away from everything else that originally was going on in the previous 2 seasons.
I would say that this did a good job of establishing side jobs and side gigs and developing your own career versus following a mainstream career. That was the big focus of this season, and I think that the pop band side venture was great for her because it also did one thing that she hadn't really had before, which is rather than kind of failing up, where like she falls face first into different opportunities really easily for herself. This time she fell face first into a completely failing band that had no chance and proved it herself.
I feel like that kind of plotline is too silly for this kind of series, but then again, it more than made up for it with the excellent music that we got to hear during this season. And the characters did make it work. I was a little reluctant at first, but it also grew on me.
Oh yeah, OTM fucking slaps. They are fantastic, though. If there's any complaint I have about like the OTM tracks, it's that it's just too short. There's not enough of them.
Preach.
Especially Aggressive Girl, which is one of the songs they have. I really like that one. I like the way that the kind of metal opener kind of dissolves into this J-pop thing that kind of carries the tune and runs with it. But neither here nor there. We're talking about the show itself. I would say I think that this season leans much more heavily on the philosophy exploration versus the day-to-day office life exploration. Like, it very clearly leans to that side on purpose.
I could see that. Okay. When you put it like that, I could definitely see why they would have Retsuko participate in this band.
It's a similar thing to season 2 where Retsuko kind of fell face first into money without earning it, and she had to have the struggle of whether or not she should live a life that she doesn't believe in, that's easy, or if she should continue her work of striving and challenging herself in order to become a better person through the workspace environment. Whereas with this season, it was much more the question of should she strive to have popularity despite risk and threats to herself by doing it? Or should she work her quiet life and remain in the office? Which ultimately she chooses to actually go back to her quiet life, but be a bit more aggressive in what she wants.
Right, because she gained newfound confidence in, essentially taking the wheel for this whole band she stumbled upon, because Hyuda, the band manager, proved to be kind of ineffective. He has an eye for talent, but Lord, he sucks at management.
He's a bad band manager in the sense that he's not helping the band do what they want, but he is very good at getting them opportunities. Which is reflected by how the band is basically down to like single digits of fans after Retsuko leaves the band.
Oh, that's right. Oh.
But I would say, despite it being like a huge departure in tone, even from season 2, where like you have like the out of nowhere billionaire love plot line where like she could stay with him and be his girlfriend, but she'd kind of be under his thumb. It's a huge difference. I don't think it's as unrealistic as season 2 was, though. I think that with the slow buildup of the band, and that like they don't become mega stars overnight, but they do become local stars. I think it works for me better than season 2's billionaire plotline.
I'm gonna have to give you that because, when you put it like that, the popularity of the band grew within a month's time. more than a month's time span. Whereas, yeah, the Billy, that guy came back too. That surprised me. I did not expect him to show his face again in this series.
That is definitely one place where I wasn't big on this season, was the way they used a lot of side characters or returning characters was kind of purely just to get characters where they needed to be, especially for Haida. Because, like, Director Washimi, Director Gori, Tadano, a lot of them were just there to help Haida get into positions or fill him in on what's happening. They weren't really there to do anything for themselves this season, especially Gori with her app, which probably only had 2 people on it, which is why they were a perfect match.
Yeah, match made somewhere, but...
A match made on an app with only 2 people.
Yep.
Alright, well, I would say that this season is very different from seasons 1 and 2, but I don't think it's worse. It retains its snappy, clever writing. It has a huge focus on kind of very high-minded philosophy and exploring some pretty high-minded concepts of things like the value of earning your money versus being paid a paycheck, the nature of self-motivation and self-employment versus routine employment, the question of whether or not it's worth pursuing a side gig knowing that it may never make money, and the idea of what makes a perfect partner for someone may not necessarily be what's reliable and smart, but just somebody that understands you on an emotional level. I would say overall, I like this season quite a bit. I hope that it's able to return back to a happy middle ground with previous seasons, where it kind of returns back to its original themes. But I'm not annoyed this season exists. And I think that Inui, despite the fact that she was a much better choice for Haida, I'm not dissatisfied with the idea that he did leave her behind. It's much in the same vein that Retsuko left behind her own possible suitor, who was actually a really great guy, who was well off and had a good sense of humor. I think that it's a lot of Haida and Retsuko having similar arcs and developments. So I would say overall, this season, I liked it. I would hope that it goes back to a similar format to the previous seasons, but I wouldn't mind if we continue to get seasons like this.
Likewise, this season, the whole series is pretty good. Season 3 in particular, I did enjoy, but not to the extent of Season 1 and 2, as I've said before. This season did make some slight deviations from its normal premise, but, in spite of some of its shortcomings, or what I perceive to be its shortcomings, it actually had some pretty good characters and soundtracks to kind of compensate for that. The music was very mesmerizing. The new characters, all lovable. Didn't hate a single one, and they all have their own quirks that are very charming. Overall, still a little uneasy about Haida and Retsuko potentially hooking up, but like Nick said, I'm kind of optimistic in thinking that this season's laying the groundwork for something new, and kind of would like to see a return to the normal premise next season as well. That's just my take. Overall, thumbs up.
All right. Well, I think that's all we've got time for. Thank you for joining us, as always.
As always.
This has been Nick.
This has been Brendan.
Have yourself a pretty little night.